Socialists want to take away corporations that are currently owned by stockholders or wealthy individuals and put them under workers' control. There are whole areas of the economy, like healthcare and education, that we think should be run by the state outside of any kind of market. A common objection to this idea is that when we talk about using the state to take away the property rights of the people at the top of society and bringing whole sectors of the economy under state ownership, it sounds like we want a very powerful state. This, we're told, is a bad thing to want because power corrupts. I talk about this argument against socialism in an article I wrote for Jacobin earlier this year, and what I say there is that the premise that we shouldn't trust anyone with concentrated economic power is absolutely right. It applies to party bosses and authoritarian Soviet-style systems, and it equally applies to wealthy capitalists in the system we have right now. Socialists agree with that, and that's exactly why we want to end capitalism and bring the economy under democratic control. This spring, I debated the pro-Trump, pro-border wall, libertarian, right-winger Stefan Molyneux about capitalism and socialism. Here's what he said then.
See, I'm of the opinion, and I think it's more than an opinion, I think most people accept this, that human beings cannot in any way, shape, or form handle power. Power is very bad for us. You know, when I was a kid, we had to put coins in the heating device, and sometimes we had to put actual pennies in the fuse box because we it was a huge fire hazard and so on. But human beings can't handle huge voltages of power, political power, any more than the pennies when I was a kid could handle electrical power. They regularly melted and sort of dripped out. Human beings get overwhelmed and blown out and corrupted by power. As the old saying goes, power tends to corrupt, absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely.
Now, as little as I like Molyneux, I do actually like this analogy. Let's think a little harder about how it works. Exactly how do we get from power corrupts to socialism is bad? Well, when you're trying to respond to an argument for a position you don't like, and there's some ambiguity about how to interpret that argument, it's a good practice to try to steelman it. The idea is that you want to interpret it as being the best, most persuasive possible version of that argument, precisely because if you can show that even that version fails, then that's a lot more significant than just showing that some sloppy version fails. So I think that the best version of Molyneux's argument goes something like this. Premise 1. Under socialism, all political and economic power will be concentrated in the hands of government bureaucrats. Premise 2. If bureaucrats are entrusted with enormous power, they will abuse it. Premise 3. Any form of social organization that predictably leads to such abuses of power is unacceptable. Conclusion: socialism is unacceptable. This is a pretty common line of argument from right-wing critics of socialism. Here's Canadian self-help author and right-wing guru Jordan Peterson saying something quite similar.
And then when the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good.
So, what should we say about this? I think we need to grant that this argument has two important things going for it. The first is that the conclusion follows from the premises. If you accept all three of those premises, that socialism means putting all political and economic power in the hands of government bureaucrats, that those bureaucrats will abuse that power, and that any form of society that leads to those abuses is unacceptable, then you also have to accept that socialism is unacceptable. The second thing it has going for it is that out of these three premises, two are clearly correct. Societies like Stalin's Russia and Mao's China where all political and economic power really was concentrated in the hands of state bureaucrats, really did involve all sorts of horrifying abuses of power, and that is a problem. But the first premise is just nonsense. It's not at all true that the socialist movement that exists today wants a system where a few state bureaucrats control everything. Nobody here at Jacobin wants that. No one in DSA wants that. In fact, that's why there's a D at the beginning of DSA. Democratic socialists know that we need a robust set of democratic rights and civil liberties precisely to prevent abuses like that. In fact, what we want is exactly the opposite of what people like Molyneux and Peterson say that we want. We want a society with less concentration of power into the hands of a small number of individuals than what we have right now. That's one of the reasons that we want to expand democracy into the workplace. You could just substitute capitalists for bureaucrats, and that argument we just looked at against socialism could be an argument against capitalism. Think about the conditions in Amazon warehouses. One poll showed that a full 91% of Amazon's associates would not recommend working there. It's not hard to see why not. Amazon employees are literally breaking their backs as they rush to make demanding quotas enforced by constant electronic surveillance. The rate of serious injuries is through the roof. Now, maybe you could say that a kinder, gentler CEO than Jeff Bezos would not treat people this way. But, well, I'll let Jordan Peterson explain what's wrong with that idea.
You're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better.
The Petersons and Molyneux of the world are right that power corrupts. But that's not a reason to keep the capitalist status quo. It's a reason to replace it with socialist democracy.